Today, we can detect and respond, but tomorrow, we can prevent and orchestrate. Judges, I'd like to invite you to imagine a future with me, where every customer has a living mirror, something that's able to track what they're doing to ensure that they can prevent fraud. My name is Manas, and I'm joined by Saharsha, Hritika, and Matt, and together we are EVA Consulting. AI is evolving today, and we must keep pace with it. You yourself have stated that staff alone is not enough, and we must develop those technological capabilities that come with it. So what have we done? We've kept three things in mind. Firstly, we must maximize fraud detection whilst minimizing customer disruption. Secondly, we must leverage AI in a way that keeps in line with trends in bank fraud. And thirdly, we must leverage your core capabilities. So where does that leave us with the core question of this case today? How can you be proactive rather than reactive and stay ahead of the curve, blending your technological know-how with human expertise? And our answer is twin to trust. We will combine tech, team, and transparency, simply but efficiently. Firstly, let's look into this tech aspect. It's about developing digital twins, these living copies of your existing customer data, which allows us to test into the future and look at those what-if scenarios. But what can you actually do with these what-if scenarios? You leverage it with your team. We look to revitalize the current operations of your red teams and your blue teams that currently operate within your organization. And finally, transparency. You are a global leader, and therefore you must leverage your position in consortium-based data sharing. And we have strong impacts for both the customer and the bank. For the customer, we see a 38% reduction in fraud cases. And for the bank, we see a reduction in $84 million paid out as a result of fraud. So Saharsha, how do we get there?
So when Manas introduced Twin to Trust, all of you in this room must have been very excited to understand what does that strategy actually looks like. But before we do that, I want to take a step back and actually quickly run you through the logic behind how, for the case question you asked us today, we came to the conclusion that Twin to Trust is the right and the winning answer. Today, the case really wanted us to focus within the fraud within the banking space. And we saw three rule of thumbs that you have to be very wary of. First is responsibility to combat fraud is mostly with banks. Secondly, data is an asset you have to leverage a lot in this space. And third, minimizing fraud is a shared mission across everyone within the industry. And for you, HSBC, the takeaway is clear for this question, which is you must lead a data-driven, collaborative fraud prevention with accountability. Keeping this key takeaway in mind, now, when we try to understand this industry that we have in hand, it is very important to understand what is happening in this banking space then. For that, we looked at various reports from industries such as McKinsey, regulators such as HKMA, and your very own partner, Feedzai. And there were 5 key trends that consistently emerged across all these reports. First was that there's a huge uptake in behavioral biometrics. Second is a rise in real-time data monitoring. Third is a use of us humans in the loop for AI. Fourth is a rise in the use of consortium-based data sharing. And the last one being, again, a rise of predictive data analytics. We now have identified and understood the key trends, but where do you, HSBC, stand? You are a leader in the industry for innovation and tech expertise. And if not all the trends, 2 out of these 5 trends have already been addressed by your own initiatives. For instance, the first one, your partnership with BioCatch has pretty much flagged all possible frauds through behavioral biometrics. And secondly, through your partnership with Google Cloud. This is something I'm pretty sure all of us in this room are well aware of for a real-time data risk assessment. With 2 key initiatives already there, this leaves us with 3 trends that are yet to be addressed. And this is like a gap for us to be wary of, to understand where can we be proactive to understand the next step for fraud prevention. But before we understand what is a strategy that can help us close this gap, let's remember what your company's head of fraud told us. She told us, keep in mind 2 things. 1, maximize fraud detection. Second, minimize customer disruption. This was the 2 levers that we use to understand our winning strategy. Our winning strategy, therefore, in this graph, leverages these 2 factors, and what we really want is that top left circle. A winning strategy, therefore, is something around a digital twin and initiating a consortium. we as a team, EVA Consulting, did consider other strategies, such as a customer-driven fraud mitigation strategies, such as having training modules or heavy multi-factor authentication. But think about your own experience, having to spend hours in training and onboarding, or just having to download yet another app just for the sake of authentication. Think about how frustrating, how inconvenient this is. This is why we decided not to go ahead, because this also leads to customer churn for your customers. Secondly, AI-driven strategies, mostly around agentic AI front, is something that's very cool. That sounds very cool. But right now, there's a lot of legal risks, a lot of decision-making risks, and most importantly, hallucination risks. Because fraud is something that's constantly evolving, and right now, agentic AI, therefore, is used more as a reactive tool than a proactive tool. Looking back at the funnel, we took all of you through it, so therefore, a winning strategy and the right one is therefore twin to trust. So Manas, can you walk me through what that strategy looks like?
Absolutely, Saharsha. So we thought about those 3 core tenets: predictive analytics, human in the loop, and finally, data sharing. But what do we bring to the table with the strategy? We bring technology, team, and transparency. And together, we bring twin to trust. Now let's do a quick run through of what the strategy can look like. Firstly, looking at the predictive analytics or the technology prong. This is where we will develop the digital twins, the living copies of existing customer data, which will then help us to run future simulations, those what-if scenarios. Secondly, will be the human in the loop. This is how we will develop your red and blue teams. And finally, data sharing and transparency. You must take part in consortium-based data sharing. Looking into this first prong, let's look into what the digital twins can actually do and how it helps your customer. For your customer, it means less friction, less calls to the bank, less alerts coming to their phone. And that ultimately also reduces the customer churn that we were talking about earlier. We first had a look at what you do currently with your revolutionizing dynamic risk assessment system. This was launched roughly 2 years ago in partnership with Google Cloud. Now, what we do realize is that you aggregate, train, score, and learn from this data. And there's been significant output as well. 2 to 4 times the number of financial crime being reported, and a further 60% reduction in false positives. However, keep in mind that with this current model, you must look at training this data on scheduled batches from the past. So you're running schedules from the past roughly 2 years. But what about the future? What about looking forward? And that's really where these digital twins can fit in. We can run those what-if scenarios. We can pull that current twin state, and finally, we can prepare an auditable canvas. You can pump this directly back into your dynamic risk assessment system. So we're trying to actually build this digital twin layer on top of the dynamic risk assessment system, not get rid of it. Yeah, of course.
When you have the digital twin, what would you try to get out of that capability? Is it fine-tuning your model, or is it testing how the customer might react to a trigger?
Yeah, of course. With our strategy, the key thing to understand is that with fraud protection, data is everything. Method is maybe valuable, but the actual being able to get more data is actually where you're going to find the value. So with the digital twin, the first thing that we see is that for every individual customer, you can create a digital twin. So the next time the customer makes a purchase, or the customer, let's say, touches a phishing email, that is reflected in your digital twin. That is really where we see the mimic coming in. Then when we look into how teams can operate effectively, you can now run this digital twin against fraud scenarios that your teams can come up with. So for example, we can create this auditable canvas, and you can now, at the end of it, get a vector match. But to actually get to that point in the first place, we have 2 key twins that we considered: the predictive twin and the comprehensive twin. Why? So the predictive twin currently helps us with the risk management side, whilst the comprehensive twin will help us to simulate scenarios and generate those future fraud cases that we were talking about. Now, while you will realize that when we build this layer, a lot of this will be relatively similar. You'll still have the idea of scope. This twin will be always on. Secondly, you'll be able to ingest data. We're going to be compliant because it is a copy of the data that you already own. However, the real kicker comes in the engine. Currently, with a dynamic risk assessment system, you have a risk horizon engine, but we're adding 2 new factors: a scenario simulator and a journey orchestrator. Looking at the scenario simulator, this really relates to that comprehensive twin we're talking about. It allows your current red team, the team that does those offensive playbooks, to run effectively. And for the journey orchestrator, it's predictive. It gives you those pre-execution controls. You can stop the fraud before it happens early on, because the output is a match vector of an auditable map. This auditable map is then reflected across your organization, because while this can be valuable to a risk compliance team or a fraud team, how can it apply to a product team or a sales team or a risk and marketing team that ultimately push this forward through to a customer? The idea was that we created a rough mock-up of what we believe a fraud intelligence platform could look like. We've only displayed the audit map for now, but we're happy to go through this further in Q&A. You can create customer snapshots to see which customers are most vulnerable. Secondly, you can leverage those geographical relationships and find the audit map itself. You can see that this customer in particular was most recently prone to a deepfake attack based on those tests that we'd identified earlier. But how are we actually going to make this come to life? How are we going to build it? There's two key pools of partners that we've identified. Firstly, our twin development partners, and secondly, our data enablers. Firstly, looking into our twin development partners, we have realized that Quantexa and BioCatch, two firms that you currently have existing partnerships with, are most valuable. Quantexa has a decision intelligence platform that can help with further development, and BioCatch helps you with the behavioral biometric side. You've maxed out what we can do with this. And from the data enabler perspective, you have Google Cloud. You have a pioneering partnership with them. We don't see any value straying away from this. We've decided to keep similar partners because otherwise we run the risk of data privacy and data issues when it comes to regulation. You must continue with your same partners. So, judges, the impact of this text set is clear. A few days ago, in our fireside chat at the HSBC office, we had a chance to talk with Mr. Kai Yang, and he told us the three key facets of data. Firstly, it must have a clear business requirement. For us, it's reducing fraud cases. Secondly, he said you must leverage the existing architecture. We are building on top of your existing dynamic risk assessment system. And finally, he said acquired data is quality data. We're giving you future-proof data that can help you develop your existing systems. It is about fine-tuning and optimization. And what does this mean for the rest of you? It means that your purple team, the team that's responsible for distributing data within your organization, can be very effective. Product, RM, sales, and marketing can produce more effective alerts and more effective outcomes, all while ensuring a seamless consumer experience. That is the core of this case. For a customer, it is less frustration. But for the team, Hritika, how do we buy it forward?
Thanks, Manas. So now we look to our second prong of our strategy, which involves team. This is underpinned by the core key concept of keeping a human in the loop. Now, for you, what this means is the red and blue team are able to shift from reactive alerts to predictive orchestration, whilst for the customer, we are able to target fraud detection for prevention at its core. Now, first of all, we acknowledge that your current systems involve your red team playing offense and your blue team playing defense. Whilst your current machine learning capabilities are able to simulate known fraud patterns, its key limitations lie in the fact that it's based on role-based monitoring, which only involves past data. From this, the key benefit of our strategy emerges using this digital twin, where we are able to run real-time simulations, which build on top of the existing ML model to deliver more accurate and faster processing for these teams. Now, within this execution, this is going to expand the scope of work for both the red and the blue teams to enable them to involve more strategic value-adding work with these predictive scenarios, as well as a refined training process, such as utilizing key tools like the dashboard we mentioned. Ultimately, for the customer, this creates fraud prevention at its core, being ahead of the curve as these emerging fraud mechanisms evolve. Now, ultimately, the first two prongs of our strategy are able to combine technology and team to develop a very robust fraud prevention strategy. From here, we look to our third key pillar of transparency, and this is influenced by our key industry trend of data sharing. Now, what this means for you is the fact that you're able to access a shared fraud intelligence platform through other key players, and for the customer, they are able to benefit from stronger industry-wide fraud monitoring systems. Now, you came to us today with the key proposition that fraud prevention demands collective defense, not competition. This is precisely the rationale which underpins our key proposition of developing a consortium-based approach in your two key markets, starting with Hong Kong, given the finest approach backed by the HKMA, and second of all, looking at the Stop Scams UK intelligence. This delivers three key benefits. First of all, the fact that you are able to share data with these key players. Secondly, that it can generate huge industry buy-in given the collective benefits. And finally, strategic partnerships through key regulators, financial institutions, and also technology partners. Now, today you came to us with three key risks considering data inaccuracies, cybersecurity vulnerabilities, and also IP infringement, all of which we have accounted for in our strategy. Given the fact that you are able to audit all actions in real time, consider that all of this digital twin simulation is occurring in a secure environment, and finally, we are able to retain human oversight. Now, considering implementation, Hong Kong and the UK emerge as prime markets to target a pilot program, given the high incidence of fraud as well as favourable regulatory infrastructure. This has determined our 4-phase approach, starting with a pilot launch in Hong Kong in 2026, moving to expansion in 2027, following a regional rollout in 2028 in Singapore, and finally global expansion by 2029. Now, ultimately, our strategy combines the key capabilities of technology, team, and transparency to deliver a scalable and defensible model which enables you to become a pioneer in the fraud prevention space and delivers key benefits to customers, enabling their data to be more secure. So, Matt, how do we bring this to life?
We've broken up our implementation into parts that reflect the prongs of our strategy. The first part, technology. This is about setting up the digital infrastructure for the digital twins. What this will look like is moving away from the statistical ML model to the more predictive digital twins. We seek to be able to roll this out in Hong Kong in 2027 as part of our first pilot. Moving on to the second prong, team. How can we actually integrate this new digital twin with the red and blue teams within HSBC? By equipping them with this digital tool, we allow the teams to now have live data feeds, which will ensure that they have real-time predictive analytics. And we hope to roll out phases 2 and 3 in regions of Singapore and UK by 2029. And now moving on to the final part, transparency. This is about our long-term vision. Looking into the horizon and beyond, we envision a world where HSBC will be a leader and pioneer in data sharing platforms. This is essentially the future of fraud intelligence. So we've shown you how to bring Twin to Trust to life, but there are key risks that must be considered to ensure success for HSBC. And we would like to draw your attention and focus on the first key risk, being regulatory and data privacy issues. When we seek to share data, especially cross-border, there is a key risk that we may breach local privacy laws. However, we seek to mitigate this by having jurisdiction-specific policies, ensuring that we have synthetic data to protect the identity of customers, and finally, ensuring that our outputs are anonymized. Now, having mitigated these key risks, what impact can we actually bring for HSBC? The first is strong cost reductions for HSBC that are pulled from 2 primary levers. The first is the number of fines that HSBC actually receive from privacy breaches, and second, the cost of payouts from these breach cases. Using these 2 levers, we believe that over the next 5 years until 2030, we can save HSBC $84 million US dollars for fraud costs. Now, the best part of this strategy is that it's actually profitable, presenting a strong business case for Twin to Trust. We believe that analysing the 2 key cash flows, the first being the actual cost of this strategy itself, mapped against how much we can actually save for HSBC, we have a payback period of 4.6 years and a strong return on investment of 19.9%.
So, judges, you came to us with a question today. How can you be proactive rather than reactive and balance technology and human expertise to deliver a pioneering solution to fraud cases? We looked at the 5 key trends that currently exist within your industry, out of which 3 stood out for further development: human-in-the-loop AI, consortium-based data sharing, and finally, predictive analytics. And our answer was Twin to Trust. We combined the 3 core tenets of those takeaways with our strategy: technology, team, and people. With technology, we developed a digital twin layer on top of your existing dynamic risk assessment to be able to create a brand new layer of data. This data currently evolves with how your customers interact with the bank and with transactions. Then we allowed our existing teams, our red teams and our blue teams, our offense and our defense, to work effectively. We gave them the opportunity to become strategic thinkers and think about cases of fraud rather than just running the simulations over and over again. And finally, transparency. We wanted to leverage your existing position as a leader in consortiums. We wanted to be able to now start thinking about sharing that fraud-related data so that all banks can be collective. What does this mean for your customers? Like we said, it is a seamless customer experience. We maximize fraud detection whilst minimizing customer disruption. We created an environment where customers will now have to think about less calls, less alerts, and less fear in general when it comes to interacting with their bank. So, judges, this strategy further delivered a strong use case for you. We reduced the number of fraud cases by 38% for your customers. We decreased costs for you as a result of fraud payouts by $84 million. And we were profitable at the end of it, resulting in a 19.9% ROI. So yes, we do realize that fraud is evolving today. However, HSBC can evolve with it. And with our strategy, we will not only protect our customers, we will protect you. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and we'll now open the floor to Q&A.
Your presentation time is up. We will move forward to the Q&A session now. Q&A session starts now.
Two questions from me. One, what was the total cost of deployment? And
Matt's
then,
happy to take this one.
Could we please go to slide 60? Yep, so we've broken up the costs into four main buckets. We see platform and infrastructure, data and compliance, ecosystem, and people and control. So those are the four buckets. However, the reason why we say we have profitability is when we look at the returns that we can have with our strategy, we've broken this up over the next 5 years, and we've also ensured that regardless of the sensitivity, we'll still be cash flow positive and have ROI.
Cool. And then you talked a lot about a consortium approach. Who is going to own, manage, govern, support that consortium?
I'm happy to take this one. If we move to slide 88, we have noted that HSBC is currently part of two key consortiums in Hong Kong and also the United Kingdom. Now, in terms of ownership, we recognize since it is a consortium approach, the idea is that there is collective ownership of the data. Whilst HSBC is a player who is able to be a pioneer in this space, the idea is that this is shared data amidst the key players. As we can see in the one in Hong Kong, there's key players like Standard Chartered Bank, Hang Seng Bank, etc. Whilst the one in the UK also has key players like Barclays, Lloyds, Nationwide, etc. So in terms of ownership, we do acknowledge that a consortium does involve the fact that there is a shared level of ownership given the shared access to data.
On your timeline slide, your pilot isn't until Q4 2026. What would you need to do to be able to bring it forward to Q2?
The reason why we've initially had the first pilot take about 1.5 years to develop is we recognize that this is a pioneering idea in the industry. We have seen digital twins being able to use at banks, but for different sections that are not for fraud. So we believe that that's why we had a pretty conservative 2-year timeline looking at what other banks have done in the past. So for example, Commonwealth Bank with their lending service, that took 1 year, but we left a bit more gap than that. However, to answer your question of how can we actually speed this up, this is where the data comes in. We believe that HSBC is very well positioned in the market. You've got a lot of data, you've got a lot of customers. So if you are able to leverage that as a key competitive advantage, we believe that that can actually bring forward the timeline to ensure the pilots are faster.
Just on your solution itself, why would we need to create a twin when we know this is retail, we know customer segmentation because we've been banking them for years? What stops? How would this be advantageous to us just doing synthetic data modeling and just creating infinite number of personas, which to me, back to your investment case that you had on the slide, would be far more cheaper?
So I think the key thing to understand with digital twins is that they're directly linked to your actual customers. So when your customer makes a specific transaction or interacts with a specific part of your bank, then the digital twin evolves. And it's all automated. That is what actually links the digital twin. If you were to go ahead with a traditional approach where you could create these infinite number of personas and train an infinite amount of data, well then there's this really strong case being made that you have to employ additional tools outside of the digital twin to think about actually processing this data. The other key aspect that we do need to consider is that when we create these infinite personas, there's a lot of data to grab onto. And if we were to look at maybe, say, using an agentic AI approach or an AI approach in general, there's a really high chance of hallucination as well. And the training period can take quite a bit of period of time. So digital twins are actually effective. And furthermore, they're proven within the banking industry. If we go to slide 96, please. We have realized that people have utilized these in high-risk cases. Combank utilized it for for home lending within the default systems. So that's also quite a significant use case. JP Morgan utilized it for tokenization within the Connexus product. And finally, the Percipient Twin. This is a Singaporean fintech, and they are specializing in creating digital twins for enterprise. So other banks just have done it before, and this is a really prime opportunity for you to do it. It also is really easy for you to build the additional layer that we're talking about, because we're not trying to strip away your current main source of data, which is your DRA. We're trying to make sure that we can create an additional layer that helps you look into the future.
Just to add on to one more point, the key question that the case actually asked was, how do we transform from being reactive to predictive? Your current ML model, that is all trained on past data. The digital twin aims to have live feed data, which can allow you to predict fraud more from a prediction standpoint rather than reacting to it.
I like the idea of the blue team and the red team.
Q&A time is up. This is the end of your presentation session. Thank you, EVA Consulting.